Yalimadat, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this cold, at least in Toronto, Monday evening. I'm really excited to be hosting today's session, which is going to take us through for the whole hour. We're excited to introduce a panel of excellent panelists, expert panelists, who are ready to share their experience with you and to impart their knowledge and their advice to you. So thank you so much again for joining us. A little bit about what today is going to look like. It's going to be a 1-hour session, as mentioned. We're really excited to get input from you, so please feel free to share questions in the question box. We will make sure that we leave 15 minutes at the end, if not more, to answer these questions. If you want, feel free to assign a question to a panelist based on what they've said, or you can leave a question open-ended, and any panelist who wishes to answer it can. Next, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Natasha Wally. I am the National Convener for Career Exploration and Guidance on the Education Board. I am also a Placement and Employer Relations Manager at the University of Toronto, and I work with the Master of Urban Innovation program. You can see we have 4 panelists joining us today. I'm going to ask all of the panelists to turn off their cameras except for Nadeem Kassam. We're going to be doing a little bit of one-on-one with each panelist to learn a little bit more specifically about their career journey. So thank you so much, Nadeem, for joining us. Do you mind just starting off by giving us a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for having me on the panel this evening. It's truly a pleasure, and to all those that are watching this, feel free to again add me on LinkedIn and reach out at any point in time. So a little bit about myself. My name is Nadeem Kassam. I have 15 years of capital markets experience on both the institutional and retail side of the capital markets space. Currently work as the head of investment strategy at Raymond James, and my responsibility is setting our investment strategy targets and providing guidance for the 500-600 advisors across our platform, who collectively manage upwards of 60 billion of retail assets. I currently have I've achieved my CFA as well as completed my MBA, and always looking to learn, and so hopefully continue to add to my knowledge base in the years ahead.
Thanks, Nadeem. Awesome. Very impressive. Really happy to have you. So let's start off. You touched on your education. You clearly have a lot of it, and you've definitely followed Maulana Hazrat Imam's guidance about continuous education. And I'm sure some of the parents on today's call are nodding their heads aggressively and maybe nudging some of their children who are hopefully also on the call. So you're an example of the value of education for sure. You have an undergraduate degree, you have a master's degree, and you're a CFA charter holder. Can you tell us a little bit about each of these and how they've helped you in your career? So your MBA, your CFA, how have these helped you as you progressed and grew?
Yeah, so just for context, I think I started my undergraduate degree, what is it, like around when you're 18 or 19? I finished my MBA when I was, I think, 34. So that's almost 15 years of studying, and not necessarily something that everyone has to follow, but it's kind of the path that I've taken. So for starters, I did an undergraduate degree in finance at York University. I really found that to be, an area of interest and my true passion, that is investing in capital markets and really understanding, what drives, business fundamentals, what drives investment returns, and why certain assets, whether it's housing or stocks and bonds, are valued and perform differently at different points in time and at different periods in the cycle, if you will. And so that was part of my, like, part of the initial, time when that, what piqued my interest was when I was doing my undergraduate degree, and I reached out, and once I completed that degree, I entered the workforce, and unfortunately with just a finance degree, it's quite difficult to find your dream job, and so you got to take some of these entry level roles and kind of get exposure and learn not only the soft skills, but a lot of the hard skills that come with having a full-time job and working as an employee for a firm. I quickly realized that where I wanted to end up was, whether, be on the portfolio management investment side of things. And one of the requirements, if you will, other than, having a finance degree or having some sort of quantitative undergraduate degree, was having a CFA charter. This is a designation that, many deem as the rite to passage. So if you want to be either an investment manager, if you want to be in research, in a strategy role that I'm currently in, or on the M&A, be an investment banker, like this tends to be a highly sought after requirement that employers tend to look for. It's a very rigorous process to pass the 3 exams, 300 to 500 hours of studying, and even then, many candidates unfortunately do not pass on their first attempt, and I was one of them. But what it does show for what it shows to employers is that a candidate's passion, dedication, and commitment to pass and really stay focused on pursuing this designation. It's quite deep and dense in terms of the content. You get really into the nuts and bolts of what drives financial assets and investment returns, if you will. And so it's a really exciting exercise, but it can be very gruesome and boring for those that are not very passionate, right? So you quickly figure out if this is where a person wants to kind of pursue in terms of their career projection. So again, that's something that I decided, and it was very helpful for me to actually land several roles and experience different sides of the capital markets industry. What I found with the MBA was it gave me more kind of managerial networking expertise and exposure. So rather than trying to study, absorb, and pass a test, what the MBA gives you exposure to is really developing team working abilities, presentation skills, negotiation, and communication skills. For example, there's a lot of smart, intelligent individuals that tend to do their MBA after they've gathered a few years of experience. And believe it or not, everyone in the room thinks they're right. So what the MBA does is it helps to equip you with the skills and tools to negotiate yourself within team settings, which is likely what many of us experience when we're outside in the real world and working with teams and colleagues, right? So again, this is a different type of skill set, and for me, I felt it was the right time to do the MBA, and I did it on a part-time basis.
Excellent. Yeah, very interesting. And definitely you must be passionate if you're willing to do 300 to 500 hours per exam in finance and investing. And congratulations to you for being successful on that.
Thank you.
I have 2 more questions. I'm going to start with this one. So it's actually, I don't think it's on the slide. So you've worked at a bank and are now at an investment firm, correct? Yeah. Can you tell us, and usually when people think about finance, especially students, because I've worked with students in finance, they automatically think bank. I'd like you to expose them a little bit to an investment firm. What are the similarities and what are the differences for people who might not be as aware?
So I would say Canada is a very unique region or market, if you will. Financials represent a very heavy allocation, if you will, as it relates to the overall economy. But it's dominated by the big five banks, right? So when you think about, let's say the US market, there's thousands of banks. Many of them are depository institutions. So it's not, let's say, an oligopoly, which is present in Canada, like the US, for example. So Raymond James is the largest independent, so non-bank investment firm, right? And so this is the only difference between Raymond James and others, which are also independent and from the banks, is that we just are not a depository institution. So you actually don't go to Raymond James and deposit your check and withdraw your money from a teller or a ATM machine, for example. That's mainly the difference. But from a wealth management perspective, a lot of the capital market functions that are present at the bank, so M&A, research, sales and trading, all of these functions are also present at Raymond James, for example. But given the unique dynamic of the Canadian marketplace, which is primarily dominated by the big five banks, that's the reason why there's this slight difference. But our parent firm, for example, Raymond James and Associates in the U.S. is a publicly traded firm and operates very similarly as we do in Canada, with the only exception that, similar to the U.S. depository institutions, they don't take deposits, so they function similar to the way we operate here. But in terms of the overlap in terms of structure and businesses, they're very similar.
Okay, great, thanks. And last question, we have 1 minute. So very briefly, can you tell us, because you clearly are extremely successful and have been in the industry for quite some time, can you tell us what you think are the top 3 skills somebody looking to launch, right? Our younger students should have? What are the top 3 skills you think they should have from now?
I think they definitely need to be passionate about finance, investing. They need to be eager. They need to be naturally curious, right? I think finance, the investment industry is quite broad. Whatever you learn in school and even through these various, like, the process that I've gone through, whether it's undergrad, CFA, MBA, you'll never know everything, right? And so you naturally need to be curious and ask questions and show that hunger, that eagerness when you speak with a hiring manager or others within the industry that you're looking to potentially learn from. I think having a very positive attitude, can-do attitude, I think is quite important. I think a lot of these things are underemphasized in many conversations with individuals that work in the industry. I think there's a lot of emphasis on getting designations and getting the academic certifications, but more so, it really comes back to fit. When I think about hiring and I've gone through a recent recruitment process recently, I think there were probably individuals that crossed all the boxes as it relates to their academic and professional experience. But where the rubber really hit the road was, are they passionate? Do they have potential? Are they willing to grind it out and work the hours to get, to meet certain deadlines, right? So these are key things. You got to be passionate, and this has to be something that you're really keenly interested in doing. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Clearly, you are passionate, and your success is definitely a byproduct of that. Thank you so much, Nadeem.
No problem. My pleasure.
Look forward to meeting you at the roundtable. Thanks so much. Okay, our next speaker is Sabaa Notta. She is the inclusive finance. She works in inclusive finance at World Bank Group. Sabaa, do you mind doing a quick introduction before we begin the Q&A with you?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. As Natasha mentioned, my name is Sabaa Notta. I have about 7 years of work experience in the international development and finance space. I'm currently working in inclusive finance at the World Bank Group. So for those of you who don't know, the World Bank is an international financial institution. They provide grants and loans to mostly governments. We have different arms within the World Bank Group, such as the IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation. They work mostly with the private sector. And then for me specifically, I'm working for a team called CGAP, which is a think tank that's housed within the World Bank and does a lot of research in the financial inclusion space.
Great, thank you. Wonderful introduction. So, I don't know how many people have had a chance to go on your LinkedIn, and maybe some will afterwards, but I noticed that your path into finance was a little bit different. You have a BBA, which is somewhat related, and completed your Master's of Public Administration in Development. Can you explain your journey, how you led from one to another, and how these two seemingly different worlds, and we do have a question about ethics as well that we'll get to later on from the audience, how does development intersect with finance and the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm going to go back a few years to my high school days, and I found that the courses that I was mostly interested in revolved around skills such as math and data analysis and project management and writing. And while I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do at this stage, a natural fit seemed like pursuing a business degree at that time. It aligned with my interests and my skill set, but it was broad enough for me to, leave my future career a bit flexible. And so I pursued a Bachelor of Business Administration. I also, similar to Nadeem, went to York University and did my BBA from there. But I found that even throughout my undergrad, while I was gravitating towards finance courses there as well, I still remained confused. And so I complemented this with summer internships. I worked at RBC throughout my 3 summers and worked for various finance teams within the bank to learn a little bit more about my options there. And so my final year, my undergrad hits, and I still wasn't 100% sold on what I wanted to do. And growing up, as I'm sure we can all relate to, I was surrounded by, the very real issues that the Somali community and beyond face coming from regions such as East Africa and South Asia. And as Somalis, we have the opportunity to get immersed in various development issues through events such as the World Partnership Walk, or even getting involved in or learning about the various aspects of the AKDN. And so throughout my undergrad, aside from my day-to-day classes, I found myself getting involved in student groups outside the typical career-oriented ones to be able to further explore my interests and meet other like-minded students. And this is where I was heavily involved in associations like the Schulich Charity Association. And so the final months leading up to my graduation come, and my classmates around me are, getting positions at banks and accounting firms and et cetera. And I have yet to make a decision at this point. And I was still in touch with my RBC colleagues at this time. And one of my colleagues had told me about this fellowship program at AKF Canada. It's the Youth Fellowship Program. And for those of you who don't know, it's for adults under the age of 30 all across the country to get international experience and work with different local AKDN agencies around the world. And one of the streams within this fellowship program is related to microfinance. And so microfinance is now more commonly known as the broader term of financial inclusion. And so for those of you who don't know, this is essentially providing financial services and opportunities to underserved or unserved populations. And so I was immediately intrigued by this, and I applied. And a few months later, I moved to Nairobi post-graduating and started my journey in development. And then fast forwarding a few years, by this stage, I've worked for a couple of organizations in development finance. However, I found I was unable to move up in my career without getting a master's degree. And so the development world differs from the private sector world somewhat in this way, where a master's degree is a requirement to work at many large multilateral organizations, such as the United Nations or even the World Bank. And so while the type of master's can vary, so from a master's in business administration or public administration or public policy, I made my decision based on what I thought would complement my undergrad degree and what I needed to, A, fill my gaps in knowledge and skills, and secondly, to build a network in a sector where I thought I would ideally like to work in. And so this is where I chose my master's in public administration, and I specialize in development practice. And so on one hand, my BBA helped me with the background I needed to understand the world of finance and how financial institutions operate. But my master's in public administration helped me gain that background I needed to understand the world of development. So from various stakeholder lenses, such as how government actors create policies and regulations, or how certain financial institutions serve low-income populations, and most importantly, the needs of low-income populations, i.e. the customers themselves. And of course, both of them have helped me enhance my skills, such as presentation, research, public speaking, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent. Thanks, Sabaa. I love how curious you were, but you always knew kind of what the next step was. And
Right.
I liked how you also shared that you were a little confused, even as when you graduated, about what you're going to do. That's not uncommon. And I want undergrad students who are listening, or even high school students, to know that that's normal. However, what you did, Sabaa, was you went and sought out opportunities to see where your interests lie, right? And you engaged in experiential learning that helped you determine what your career path is going to be. So yes, it might be a time of confusion, but there's a lot of ways that you can help dissect where your interests really are and what your next step should be. So thanks for sharing that. We have probably time for one more question. And I think because we're talking about your international experience, we'll go to that second question. So with your international experience, you really briefly touched on this at the end of your answer. Can you tell us more about the value of international experience and how it's helped your career?
Yeah, so at the World Bank, we actually have this system where country or regional directors get the opportunity to do rotations. And so these directors are in charge of, a portfolio of projects within a certain region. But with the rotation program, they're only allowed to work in that region for a certain amount of years. And so the reason that the World Bank actually does this is to help gain cross-sectoral learning and to bring new ideas into the regions, and essentially not to keep things stale. And I think that this system works really well. And it's actually unfortunate that it's only mostly mandated for country and regional directors at the bank. But I don't think this means that you as an individual can't do that too. And so I've taken my experience working with various financial institutions and relevant market level actors in these regions, and I've applied them to any new region that I've worked in. And so in this way, I feel like it's helped me a lot with my technical work and my technical knowledge. And then on the other hand, it's also brought value to my career through the new perspectives I've gained. So, we live in a highly interconnected world, as we've seen with our recent experience with the pandemic and its effects, the rapid spread of information, and essentially in everything that we see or we do. However, it's only when I stepped outside my comfort zone and I really immersed myself in new regions in every aspect of my life, not just from a career standpoint, was I actually better able to understand the work that I do and then apply this new perspective to my career and beyond in my personal life as well.
Thanks so much, Sabaa. That's excellent. Great perspective. And I hope we can maybe get to that a little bit later on, because you're definitely not the only one with international experience on this panel and vouching for this experience. So thanks for sharing that. And then finally, I guess, because we don't have too much time to get to that last question, I just want to talk about the importance of networking. And I think you wouldn't be here if it wasn't because of networking. And I'd like to highlight that, Sabaa, and correct me if I'm wrong, every single kind of next step that you've had in your career journey has been as a result of networking, and not like an uncomfortable elevator pitch type networking, but a natural relationship building, connecting and maintaining relationships.
Yeah. I can speak about it more in the roundtable if
Perfect. That's great. Thanks so much. And thank you for your insights. Excellent. And great to see a woman in finance doing such great things. Thanks for making us proud.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Okay, next I'd like to invite Amira Lee Kazani to turn on his camera. Amira Lee is the Director of Finance at Explore Edmonton. Welcome to the panel, Amira Lee. If you can give us a quick introduction about yourself.
Thank you. Yadimadat, all of you. First of all, I'm excited to be here as a part of this panel. So thank you for this opportunity. My name is Amirali Kazani. Fortunate enough to obtain education in 3 different countries. I have work experience of over 15 years in accounting and finance across 3 continents. Thanks to Almighty for this. Accountancy runs in the family or in the blood, as they say. I've got 2 uncles who are gold medalist chartered accountants, and 2 of my brothers are also into accountancy as well. So naturally, I got this fascination of numbers from there. And here I am, a fellow chartered certified accountant and a certified professional accountant.
Thank you.
To complement this number knowledge that I have gained, and as Nadeem mentioned, we need to get more negotiation and analytical skills. I obtained an MBA from Simon Fraser University, specializing in international business. Having worked in diverse industries, including property management, steel manufacturing, banking, healthcare, education, I now work with Explore Edmonton as Director of Finance with a vision to make Edmonton a destination of choice. Besides working, I have also lectured MBA and accountancy students in East Africa. And finally, have been fortunate to be on Uganda National Council for Human Resource Development and then on the Youth and Sports Board.
Wow, quite a well-rounded professional you are. And again, I love to hear the theme of international experience. I think we're really excited to hear a little bit more from you. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, speaking of that, you talk a lot about your community work. So we'll get started with a question, both from an educational standpoint and experience standpoint. You have a lot of experience in various not-for-profits, including AKU in Pakistan, Diamond Trust Bank in Uganda. Can you tell us more about how you've seen growth opportunities and challenges working in not-for-profit? And what are some pros and cons? So usually when we think finance, you think banks, you think investment firms, you think these like people just making money and not caring about anything else. And I think you have a very different experience, maybe that, but also a very different experience to balance that. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So not-for-profit, usually they work for a cause. And this could be social, religious, scientific, charitable. These organizations have existed in parallel with the for-profit organization, and the trend continues. So there is definite growth potential there. And the prime example that we see in our daily lives is AKDN, which has so many not-for-profit agencies in the field of education, healthcare, culture, and the other domains. Traditionally, the model for not-for-profit was construed as one where ample funding was available to carry out specific activities. In essence, get the money, spend the money. This is changing. This is evolving. More and more focus has been put towards measuring the economic as well as the social impact of those activities. So that is concept of value for money. So this is good for everyone involved, especially for the finance function. How does it help? So whenever we were young and we were trying to get into different entities or different fields, we were told, okay, when you go into for-profit, there is cutthroat competition. You need to be analytical. You need to be able to present your numbers and speak towards it. And there's a bottom line focus. Good. So this bottom line focus is also coming into not-for-profit organization, not necessarily in terms of the profits we make, but how do the activities that they perform profit the society, profit the donors, and profit the objectives of the organization. So if you are in the finance function, you get to enjoy all those challenges. It's no longer an accounting function. It's more of a right-hand person to the CEO or the leadership team in providing the analytical support for strategic direction. This provides a healthy challenge to finance professionals, something which was not available in the yesteryears. On the other side, one aspect is generally observed. You get paid lesser than for-profit businesses. Well, the counter argument is it gives you more work-life balance. But again, I'm stereotyping here. It's not necessary that you go into a for-profit and you'll get paid higher. It can be the other way around. But what it definitely gives you is a chance to contribute towards a cause that you are passionate about.
That is so true, and I love how you touched on that. And that having an alignment of ethics, and again, someone's asked that question, to where you work and where you spend more days than at home and more hours than at home, has a value to it in itself. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that. And then I guess my second question is, as a director of Explore Edmonton, you definitely probably engage in some hiring directly or indirectly. What are some key skills that you like to see in younger professionals that you hire in the department?
Okay, so hiring involves making a judgment call on both the hard skills and soft skills. Mm-hmm. So finance is, as I mentioned, it is seen as a business partner in today's world, in stark contrast to what it was in yesteryears, where we say the finance is an isolated department, crunching numbers, accounting from revenues, and making payments. So what does it mean? It means that soft skills do come into play. However, hard skills still have a slight edge over the soft skills. a designation is always a plus point. And as Nadeem mentioned, sometimes it's the only door to the interview room to be there. Besides having a designation, IT knowledge is also almost a prerequisite, especially use of spreadsheets. For fewer roles in finance, we also look at other options like Power BI and dashboards. Those are also beneficial. So if you ask a checklist for a new hire, for me, it's a designation, excellent knowledge of spreadsheets, same MS Excel, and good communication skills. Again, those would get you or land you the job. But as Nadeem mentioned earlier, you need to be passionate about numbers. You need to have an obsession to work towards the betterment of the company and the organization you work for, and only then you succeed. I will not necessarily put in longer hours because that can turn few of the aspiring financial staff off, but it does come into play.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing. And I really liked how you touched on hard skills, soft skills. Hard skills are those technical skills, the things that you learned in the classroom. Soft skills are more skills that you can develop, things like over time. So communication skills, organization skills, public speaking skills. But Amira Lee, I really liked how you talked, and I would like to repeat what you said about the hard skills that are required, because at the university, I'm noticing the same thing. It's Excel, it's Power BI, and it's dashboard. Those three softwares I find are coming up in any industry and are very popular in any industry. So I'd like the audience members to take a note of those three: Power BI, dashboard, and Excel. So thanks for bringing those up. And maybe we'll have time to talk a little bit more about skills later, but I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Sure.
And then now our final speaker, last but not least, Abeed Ramji. He is the head Canadian Debt Syndicate at TD Securities. Abeed, do you mind introducing yourself quickly?
Sure. Thanks, Natasha. And first of all, thanks to you, Rizwan, and the team for putting this together. Really appreciate it, and really valuable resource for everyone. I wish I had something like this when I was in high school coming up. Or even undergrad. So thank you for that. And thanks everyone for joining. So my name is Abeed Ramji, and currently work at TD Securities, which is the capital markets division of TD Bank. Just a little bit about myself. I'm from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So I grew up there my whole life. My family's there. I decided to go outside for university, and Canada was the natural place. So I ended up in Montreal at McGill. I had never seen snow in my life before, and had a rude awakening in my first winter and first snowfall. So there was a point where I called my dad and said, "I can't do this. I'm coming back home," and he said, "Don't even think about it." So I ended up finishing my degree at McGill, and it was an undergrad in finance. And after that, I got a job at Bank of Montreal in their investment bank in Toronto. So moved to Toronto, and then worked there for a few years. And then I actually decided to leave and do something different, which is I've always wanted to volunteer with the AKDN family. And I got a job in microfinance, which Sabaa talked about. So I got a job in microfinance in Tajikistan. So I did that for just about a year. And subsequent to that, my team and my former boss at BMO said, there's still an opening for me to come back. So I came back to BMO, and a couple of years later moved to TD, and I've been there since. So total of about 15 years in the capital markets world. And
have you gotten used to the snow yet?
No, not yet. No, and I never will. Yeah.
You never will.
Yeah,
Thanks for that introduction. Let's get started into some of the Q&A. So, one second, sorry. I think I'm talking about the AKDN experience. Yeah. Again, it sounds a little off than finance, right? But it's a common theme, and I'd really like to hear your opinion. How did that AKDN experience in Tajikistan help you in your career? What did you gain from it? And what's some advice that you can give to somebody who's looking to give back, maybe take a break from their career? Is it worth it? Is it hard to get back in, etc.?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Natasha. So definitely something that I would recommend to any and everybody in terms of being able to pursue an opportunity like this. I'd say, for me personally, as I mentioned in my intro, always had an interest in some shape or form in volunteering with the AKDN family. Coming from Tanzania, my focus was, growing up in Tanzania, you see how involved the organization is and the tremendous work that it does. The school you go to is the Aga Khan school. The hospital you end up at, if you need to go, is the Aga Khan hospital. And just the tremendous work that the organization does. And so it's in my blood growing up. And at some point I wanted to make sure I was involved, and not just from sort of monetary aspect, but just dedicate my actual time. And those questions that I had where some of the advice that I got from some people actually was, are you sure about this? This might regress your career path. I was in a pretty high performing path at the time. I was 2.5 years into investment banking, and everyone's clamoring at the time in 2007 to get into investment banking. And it was a tough decision, not a decision I made lightly, but I just said that, as I mentioned in my bullet point there, there's never a quote unquote right time to do something like that. You're always going to find a reason. You're always going to find, or just a general sense of concern, whether this is actually going to regress your career and deviate you from the path that, everyone says you should take. But, as Moaba and Hazram said, that, there's different paths in life, and you're going to have multiple career changes, career choices. And as we're seeing more and more in this day and age, there's not a linear path to get to where you are. I look at myself, I ended up doing that, but I managed to get into the industry again. And I'm running the group that I was part of when before I left to volunteer. So I'd say, definitely something that I think anyone should consider if you have the ability to do so. Really take you out of your comfort zone. A lot of us might be, very comfortable in terms of where we're sort of born and raised, where we want to work, and a sense of comfort around you. But this was, at the time I applied to ACAM, which is Aga Khan Agency for Microfinance, and I didn't even know where Tajikistan was, and I accepted the offer right away. The next day I Googled, where is Tajikistan? So, you know what I mean? You gotta really challenge yourself, not just professionally, but personally. It was difficult. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to paint it with a rosy picture. It was very, very challenging in terms of living there. I thought, growing up in Tanzania, how hard can it be? It was tough. It was tough, no doubt. Language you had to learn, and just a very, very different culture and environment. But it really brought out the best in you. It tested you to the max. And at the end of the day, you're doing pretty meaningful work. So, there's a point where even one time I had the opportunity to have a report that I put together that got sent to Prince Raheem, and we had a call about it. So, it's experiences like that I'll never forget. And in terms of how that's added to my career, I'd say it's probably made me even better, financial banker I am today, based on some of those challenges that I had. So I would definitely, recommend anybody, please, anyone that's thinking about it, please feel free to reach out to me. And, I'm more than always happy to talk about my volunteer experience.
Thanks so much for being so generous with that. I think that sometimes people underestimate that you worked in microfinance, but even if you volunteered in an area that was completely different and pausing your career, what you gained, and I think when you come back, what employers see and how you explain that experience says a lot about you, your personality, your work ethic, and employers do value that as well. It's things that you can mention on your resume, in your interview, that show resiliency and hard work and passion. And these are all those soft skills that we were talking about earlier that I think set you apart from somebody else. So thanks so much for sharing that.
You summarized really well, yeah.
Thanks. So we have, I think, maybe time for one more question or maybe two. You did an undergraduate in finance from McGill, and since then you pretty much stayed in finance. How did you know finance was for you? How did you know that was the path that you wanted to go on?
Yeah, no, I think great question. And, some of my fellow panelists have alluded to this as well, is just the general thirst and, interest in capital markets. And, I don't know how to explain it, but I just always had this interest in high school and university, and, just so intrigued by the way, the stock market worked, the bond market, private equity, et cetera. I know it sounds very nerdy even to think that in high school, but it was generally, genuine interest that I had. I wasn't necessarily exposed to it. in my family per se, but I did come from a very entrepreneurial family, so it was sort of in kind of the way we did our conversations and stuff like that. But I'd say just a general passion in terms of how the way the world works when it comes to fundraising in the bond market or in the stock market. I think that was first and foremost, and then I really, as I got a better sense on how people are in finance, and all I tend to encounter was how driven they were, how ambitious they were, and it kind of aligned nicely with the way I viewed myself. And I was always very driven, ambitious, and some, I was never one to not delve into a problem even deeper. And this is what I encountered when I met people in finance. I was like, this is exactly where I think I could fit in. And then lastly, opportunity to work globally. If you're in finance in the capital markets, you could have the opportunity to work in London, New York, Singapore, and I've always been open and interested in the idea of working anywhere where there's a global financial center. So that was a big draw, I'd say, is having the option of moving to New York or London any day and find a job that could suit me. So
very interesting. Yep. For sharing that. And I guess 1 minute, really quick summary. You've been able to grow your career significantly at TD. Can you tell us 3 tips on how you were able to be so upwardly mobile in such a competitive, I want to say, industry?
Yeah, no, thanks, Natasha. So, 1 minute, I'd say, once again, constantly be intellectually curious. I think that's key, and that passion and ambition needs to come out when you're in the workforce and when you're dealing with colleagues and superiors. I think that's important. And my last sentence there is, I've summarized it in terms of just be kind, be humble, be generous. All we hear about, especially in finance, is all these, hard skills. I'm really touched on it well in terms of soft skills. Everyone just wants to tell you that, you need to know how to model this. You need to know how to do this when it comes to, some of the more technical skills. But I would say at the end of the day, just be a human being. Be a human being. Be a good human. This is what I tell my 18-month-old son every night before I put him to sleep. I don't think he understands, but I say, these are the 3 words I say. I say, be kind, be humble, be generous. Be kind to people. You never know who you meet on the way up. Be humble about where you are. Show a ton of humility in terms of what you know and what you don't know. Very likely you don't know. So just always assume, you're coming from a position where you could know more. And be generous with your time. I'm always generous with if anyone wants to learn more about what I do or learn about the industry or panels such as this, just be very generous with people and your time. So you can never do enough, is what I'd say.
Thanks so much for that. I loved how you ended with such heartwarming skills. I want to say be kind, be humble, and be generous. And I think that's great. Thanks. So now I'd like to thanks, Abeed. I'd like to invite all panelists to turn on their cameras and join us for a Zoom roundtable. So normally we'd be around a board table having some chai, as Abeed mentioned earlier to us. Unfortunately, we don't have that, but now we'd like to get everybody's perspective on some general things around finance. Feel free to share your thoughts or not, or just reiterate what somebody said or add on to what somebody said. So we do have some questions in the Q&A, so maybe we'll do this for about 10 minutes or so, or 7 minutes or so. So first question, I think is really important, and we usually include it in all of our webinars because the world is changing so fast. Tech is changing the finance industry so much. You're hearing about fintech, you're hearing about crypto. How is technology changing the finance industry from your perspective? Who would like to start?
I can take a go at it and speak more towards accounting function. So if you look at 10, 20 years back, we used to have like 50 people in accounting function, and 20 to 25 of them would be involved in making payments. Another 10 and 15 would be in collections and reconciling revenues. So it was very labor intensive per se. It has greatly reduced now with the advent of new softwares, applications, automations. We just need 2 or 3 people in accounts payable function to make it happen automatically. They're just there to supervise most of the functions and ensure the reconciliations are done. Similar thing is happening on the receivable side. We have cut down the number of people. So all in all, the tiny little .c work that used to happen manually has been taken over by machines and AI. So what's happening is more focus is towards providing a meaning to the work, more analysis. So it's taking off the lower tiers, adding higher numbers into the middle tiers and the upper tier.
Thanks. Interesting.
One thing I would add to that is, just outside of even accounting, like technology touches every spectrum of our lives, if you will. If you think about technology and how it impacts, the automotive or manufacturing side of things to how it impacts here, let's say finance, it's part and parcel the same way, right? Like I think there's a lot of productivity improvements that come from leveraging technology. All of us here are on a Zoom call doing a presentation from the comfort of our homes, right? Like this is technology in the works, right? So from an investment strategy and from a capital markets perspective, I've seen technology really enhance the productivity and the efficiency and the accuracy of everything from trading to research, modeling to forecasting. Currently, I put together a lot of research and I publish, and I have to stay on top of macro trends, investment asset classes, kind of forecast for various securities in Canada, the US, and even globally. And thanks to technology, we can actually do that through leveraging a lot of the programming languages. I think you talked about some at the onset. So obviously Excel is the best, is a common example, I would say, that is in most people's toolbox. But there's other programming languages such as Java and more importantly even Python that again can really expedite what we try to do in let's say in the research or capital markets areas of where I work. So I think technology can be leveraged, cloud, AI, that is being leveraged everywhere across the industry, and I think it has an ability to really, from a macro perspective, really enhance the growth outlook, if you will, especially as boomers. That's a big factor, right? Like the productivity and output of the Canadian economy is dependent on capital, productivity, and labor. And right now we have labor that's leaving the workforce because the boomers are aging, right? And so the only way that we can kind of keep up with the output for the economy is technology. So it impacts every spectrum of the economy in our lives. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think it's a lot's been said by Nadeem there. It's very helpful. For the students, I'd say that I think we're just in the infancy in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the benefit that tech could have in various industries, especially in finance. Finance has been pretty archaic for some time and has always been resistant to change. But I would say that it's paramount to have a good grasp on tech and the know-hows in terms of how it interacts with finance, fintech, AI, and all those buzzwords that you keep hearing. Nadeem, you mentioned some of those languages. I'd say that when we're looking to hire people, I'd say that's a definite asset. And definitely, something to consider as you think about a career that could, differentiate you from others. And it's just gonna, basically, there'll be a lot more value to your candidacy and application if you're aware of how to use some of that technology. So definitely an asset, and I would encourage students to learn some of those languages.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think we should also take into account, especially coming at it from a development finance perspective, the limitations of technology as well. So in terms of the pros and in the work that I've been doing, we've seen a lot of new players coming into the space that we wouldn't have seen before. So, during the fireside chat, I had mentioned that we're now using this broader term of financial inclusion versus microfinance. We're seeing, fintechs, as you had mentioned. We're seeing mobile network operators that are now providing financial solutions for vulnerable populations in developing countries come in. And so there's a pro to that because we're reaching, previously unreached customers in rural areas where there may not have been bank branches. But on the flip side, we're also seeing cons because now there's a greater digital divide that's been created. You're not being able to access the lowest income individuals in certain developing countries because they may not have access to, say, a mobile phone. Or you're also leaving out certain types of marginalized populations, such as, refugees and forcibly displaced populations who may not have proper, identification, for example, which is needed in a lot of these countries to even get access to a mobile phone or a bank account. So I think it's important to kind of see how technology also has, these negative implications that we need to take into account and think about.
Agreed. Thanks so much for balancing that answer out a little bit, Sabaa. Some great inputs from labor market to, even equity. So thanks so much for that. And Nadeem, I liked how you mentioned Python. I think people used to think that Python was just for programmers and for, computer nerds, so to speak. But I recently started a data analytics certificate at U of T, and we noticed that the people registering were from all sectors across the board, from nonprofit, education, finance, etc. I think data analytics, Python, Excel, etc. It's important in every industry, like Nadeem said. So thanks for that. I guess this is a question we'll end on. A really quick 30-second answer from each of you before we go into the Q&A. What is something you wish you knew at the start of your career? So we have a lot of young professionals, entry-level professionals on the call and their parents. What do you wish you knew that someone would have told you if when you were starting off? That you'd like
Maybe I can start with this one. I had alluded to this during my presentation as well, that you don't need to have it figured out when you're graduating from high school or from your undergrad. It's a journey, and it's through the real life experiences that I went through that I, got to where I am now. Of course, my education played a huge role in it, but it was also the network that I created and the people that I met and the experiences that I undertook and, the chances that I took. So I think that, you don't need to stress out about having it all figured out, and also trust, go with your gut and go with your passion as well. I know a lot of students that, a lot of my classmates went for professions that they felt like they needed to go for versus what they really wanted to go for. And then, years later, we're really unhappy. And I think that you need to kind of listen to your gut, and you can find a balance between the two as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Perfect advice. Sometimes there's so much pressure on students that whatever your major is, that you're going to be stuck with it for the rest of your life. And that's not the case. So you can ease the pressure just a little bit, relax it, explore a little bit, and show some curiosity. That's perfect advice, Sabaa. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yeah, no, I think that was really well said, Sabaa. I think for me, what I would add is, just be yourself, be comfortable in your own skin. And, there's not just one way to do things. I think at the start of my career, when I'd see people, senior to me or my colleagues, I'd always try to replicate how they thought about things or how they try to conduct their work and the way they did things. And, progressively start to, get a better appreciation of just be yourself, do things the way you think makes sense. And if you confine someone into a certain box and follow a certain template, you'd actually inhibit them and inhibit their growth. So I think I learned that luckily a bit earlier on, but it'd been nice at the start. but something that I encourage everyone to just be yourselves and I think everyone has their own what they can bring to the table and doesn't have to fit a mold, which we tend to always follow, especially in this industry in finance.
Perfect. Thanks, Abeed. Nadeem or Amirali?
Yeah. Would like to add something here, specifically as we are speaking to students. One strategy I noticed, there were parents of a high school student back in East Africa. What they did is they arranged within their network day at work session for their son with a couple of professionals that he was interested in. So that involved meeting that person, having a chat about what goes on, what is required for the profession to be successful, and then live seeing and observing what's happening in their daily life. So the son would go to one of the professional's office or clinic or wherever they were working and see how they work, what are the challenges they face, how is their day like. So that however slim it was, it gave an idea of what's their reality. as some people think that, for example, traders, they get a very handsome salary, but hey, when you look at their daily lives, they're working with a lot of stress as well. So that gives sort of an insight into what the work is, appreciate the effort and time that goes into making the daily lives happen for that professionals. Also gives the student or the aspiring profession an opportunity to think twice and see where they want to go.
Perfect. Yeah, experiential education. And just for the students here, your universities, as you start your university career, there are supports that can help you explore and get this experiential learning opportunities through the Career Center, through your program offices. So just be aware of these experiential opportunities where you can kind of get a taste of what a career might look like as opposed to just reading about it on paper. And finally, Nadeem.
Yeah, I think all the panelists really touched on some of the key things that I would have loved to know early on, if you will, in my career. The one thing I will say is when I applied to university, I applied to 7 universities across Ontario because I wanted to stay close to home. My mom wanted me to close to home as well, so that was another factor too. I didn't apply to one business degree. In fact, every single university that I applied to in terms of programs was different. So mathematical and physical science at U of T, which I eventually took, chemical co-op, I think it was in York, health science at Waterloo. So I had no clue is what I'm trying to say. I think we have a huge resource here. Again, technology, LinkedIn. We have a huge network here within the Smiley community. I think it goes back to what I touched on in my first slide. Like, you got to be curious, figure out what makes you tick. What are things that make you, that interest you? And then as Amira Lee, during the example that he went through, I think it's about reaching out to individuals, not for a job, but to ask them about what they do. What did they do throughout their career and the different roles that, let's say, you would be applying to? And that will give you, again, a better idea of whether that is, an area that you would like to pursue. I'll give you an example. I was previously in equity research, and some of the individuals that were getting hired were straight out of university. Many of them didn't last because the hours were 15 to 20 hours a day. You're doing 100+ hours a week. That in itself is not adequate for someone that wants to have a work-life balance. So again, understanding, being curious, reaching out to your networks, doing that early on. I wish I would have done that. I think would prepare you better to help navigate what your major is, what designations you're going to spend your time on, what skills you're going to learn, soft, hard, what have you. So yeah, I'll leave it there. More than 30 seconds, I think.
Perfect. No, that was perfect. And I think people are often, especially students, intimidated by the idea of asking for like a coffee chat or a quick chat with somebody, but professionals are so open to it. As a matter of fact, today for my program, I organized one. We had 15 professionals give an hour and a half of their day. So people are really keen to give back, to share their advice. It's a little flattering to talk to a student who's currently exploring. And so it's a lot, people are a lot more open to it than you think. So I'm happy that you brought that up, Nadeem. So maybe we'll get to one question from the Q&A. And again, we just have a minute, but ethics, you guys clearly value ethics. You have a connection to faith in some way, shape, or another. How ethical is this profession? Has there ever been a time where you felt conflicted around it? I'm looking more at Nadeem and Abeed here.
I was looking.
All right, Abeed, you go first.
I was like, if we were in Sabaa's situation, I would more than happily answer this. So, I think it's what you make of it. There's definitely people that I've seen get caught up in terms of the way they've conducted some of their activities. I'd say overall, though, and finance does get a bit of a bad rep sometimes. Especially the capital market side of the business, and I'd say those are very isolated incidents. So when we think about how we operate, first and foremost, you always want to make sure you're able to sleep at night. So you want to conduct yourself accordingly and appropriately. And, nothing is worth your reputation or your career. Reputation takes years to build. So I've always approached my job as from that angle where, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is contributing to the overall bank that I work at, my colleagues, my team members, and operating within those confines where, you're still able to sleep at night. So I'd say that it's ethical is how you make it, right? And in terms of what the purpose is of finance and capital markets, it does have broader ramifications in terms of when you look at the capital markets industry, where you're effectively the reason why certain things occur in terms of for companies being able to fund themselves, or companies being able to people being able to invest in those companies and earn a retirement, or earn some income. And so what you do has broader ramifications and repercussions, and as long as you take that with a heavy hand and make sure you're aware of your consequences. And I think that's what defines how you approach your career and how ethical you want to make it. So it's an individual choice, but overall, I think we're in a very important industry when it comes to finance.
Great.
Not as important as inclusive finance at the World Bank, but otherwise pretty important. Yeah.
Thanks, Abid. Nadeem? Any last
Yeah,
words?
nothing really to add there. I think it's again, right, like there's with any industry, there's going to be people that act ethically and without bias or a conflict of interest, and others that don't, right? So it's not finance that operates with these same kind of challenges. The one thing I will say though is more than many of my colleagues that work in other industries, the level of regulation and oversight that we have to go through is quite rigorous, right? So I publish research that is available for institutional retail. There's oversight on what I own, what my family owns, what I'm writing about, how the language used, and there's accountability at the end of the day, right? So again, I could speak for myself, pretty ethical in terms of what we're putting out and responsible for what we're doing, at least myself and my team. But again, there's always going to be those oddballs, right? So yeah, I would kind of reiterate Abid's comments earlier.
Wow, thanks. I think that's a great way to end on a really positive note. I want to thank each of you, Abid, Amira Lee, Sabaa, and Nadeem. Thank you so much. What a great panel, very diverse perspectives and experiences and paths and journeys, but all very successful. And I think you've given our participants a lot to think about. For our participants, we've had a lot of questions, and take this as a huge compliment to our panelists if this session is being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. It's going to be posted on the II Canada website shortly, so you can share it with your friends and family. So again, I think that's a testament to how valuable all the information each of you have provided us today. Thanks for spending your evening with us. Thank you to our audience for your engagement and your participation. We do have webinars. We usually have about 4 a year. We're going to have one more for the academic year, inshallah. So we look forward to seeing you then. Just keep an eye out on the II Canada app to see what our next topic and career exploration path is going to be. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing your feedback, and have a great rest of the week, everyone. Take care. Yali Madad.
Thanks, Natasha.